Hello everybody, my name is Allie, and today in this presentation we're going to be talking about investigating the effects of early childhood abuse and maltreatment. So to introduce this topic, we're going to talk about some long-term consequences, which we will go into further detail later. These can include economic well-being, substance abuse, incarceration, co-occurring psychiatric problems, STDs, PTSD, delayed brain development, lower educational attainment, limited employment opportunities, memory issues, violence, and chronic stress. So to fully understand this topic, we need to get into the statistics. So the prevalence of psychological abuse was 98% and neglect was 58%. At least 1 in 7 children have experienced child abuse or neglect in the past year in the United States. And then in comparison, from 2017 to 2022, there were 1.5 more hospitalizations for abuse in 2022 during the pandemic and lockdown than there were in 2017. And then an estimated 1,760 children died as a result of child abuse or neglect. And this is just a little mnemonic that helps understand the signs of abuse, so it just explains where to look for and then how old the child would be. And then I also attached a YouTube video that goes into more details of the signs of each type of abuse. So some things to look for are like suspicious injuries or inconsistent stories. So inconsistent stories would be the child explains a story but the injuries don't match up, or the child says a story but the parent's story is completely different. Unhealed previous injuries, so like bruises at different stages of healing. A child not receiving care for their injuries, so like fractures that haven't like healed correctly, awkward movements because of injuries, wearing clothing that covers skin, so like winter hoodies and sweatpants that in like 90-degree weather, frequent absences from school because the parents don't want them to have the chance of being caught, with the abuse, and then labeling the child as clumsy or accident prone due to all of the injuries that they have. So when do you report child abuse? It honestly depends on the situation, but if you are a mandated reporter, you are legally required to report any suspicion. But if you're like a normal citizen, you want to make sure that you have the whole story, because like reporting child abuse that's not accurate could make things a lot worse. And I've attached a video that explains what happens when you either don't tell the right person or you don't have all the information. And then this number right here is 1-800-4-CHILD. It's for reporting child abuse for the right person, and it gives them the right resources. So in addition to that number, there are also the 3 R's of reporting child abuse, and they are recognize, respond, and report. And there's also another mnemonic that was brought up in the video, which I highly recommend that you watch it, and it's BAT, B-A-T, and it stands for believe, affirm, and tell, and we'll go into further detail in a second. So who is a mandated reporter? A mandated reporter is a person who has regular contact with children and is legally required to report when abuse is observed or suspected, and this can include nurses, child care workers, coaches, EMS, and social workers. So I'm going to attach a video of how to report child abuse and the right person to contact and what information to give. Once again, I highly recommend that you watch this video. It goes into detail about her story, and it's very interesting and important for nursing and healthcare professionals.
In the space of child welfare, there are many people doing the work. Specifically, a gentleman, Peter Vanacore. In his work, he came up with this acronym BAT, B-A-T. B, believe. Believe the child and what they're saying to you. A, affirm. Let them know that this should not be happening to them. And T, tell. In my story, only 2 happened, believe and affirm. And actually, there was an instance where tell happened, but it was to the wrong people.
It's the agency's responsibility when they receive that phone call.
for them to collect some information. They need to make sure that that child is safe in that moment. They need to know the name of the child, the address to where the child lives, who the caregivers are in that home. If the child has told you who's the person who's harming them, please tell that. They're also going to want to interview the young person away from the person who's harming them. The worker could come and show up at the school. They'll also want to interview any other child living in the home. As a reporter, you can report anonymously. You don't have to be afraid that anything will come back to you, but you can be afraid of what will happen for that child. Because when that principal told my relatives what was going on, and we got home, things got worse for me. Tell the right people. Call the 1-800-4-A-CHILD hotline. People on the other end of the line are trained and prepared to receive your information and to walk you through what it is that you have to share about that child and that child's story to protect that child from further abuse or neglect.
So who typically does the abuse? So it could be relatives, babysitters, foster parents. The abusers usually have a poor self-concept, usually immature, and they could have a history of substance abuse. Where does it happen? It can happen anywhere. It could be home, school, daycare, doctor's offices, hospitals, recreational activities like after-school sports, anywhere. So, how do we prevent this? Educating children on what to do and say to suspicious strangers is very important. So, this can be teaching them how to say no, teaching them safe and unsafe situations, teaching them personal boundaries and their rights. This can include personal bubbles like the picture, teaching them self-defense, and then mentoring can also be very beneficial, teaching the parents about the signs to look for. It's always important to be an advocate for children, teaching them that they are not the ones to blame, and then always referring them to resources and social groups. And then I've added a child abuse and neglect hotline. This is for Ohio specifically. So sometimes it's hard for the child to tell people, and this could be due to shame or guilt, fear that the parents or abusers will be mad at them and hurt them worse. They don't want to get their abuser in trouble, fear of being removed from their home, belief that it's okay that the parents or abusers hurt them, fear of not being believed, and lastly, belief that they deserved the abuse for being bad or being in trouble. So some treatment options. First, the priority is always creating a safe environment for the child. Another treatment method is the Nordic Barnahus model, or the one-door principle, and this states that it takes unnecessary stress off the children due to being shuffled around different rooms. So when they're reporting abuse, it means that the professionals will come to the child so that the child doesn't have to go to different rooms and repeat their stories. This also reduces secondary victimization, and it's done by keeping everything child-friendly, child-centered, and sensitive, so that doesn't cause extra harm to the child and it prevents them from being re-victimized in the criminal process. The next treatment method is the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, or the CAPTA. Developmental therapy deals with how a child grows and how that growth has been changed or blocked by abuse. Interpersonal therapy deals with the way the child's relationships have been influenced by the abuse or the abuser. And then cognitive and behavioral therapy deals with the way the abused child's feelings and thoughts have changed their behavior. So circling back to the long-term consequences, I've added a video here that explains it in more detail. But in the video, a psychotherapist said that emotional abuse during childhood can change the way that you think, because constantly receiving words that hurt could lead the child into thinking that they are not good enough, and it can also lead to more violence in that child's life because they think it's okay since it happened to them. Child abuse can cause lifelong medical and psychological deficiencies such as changes in brain function, cognitive function, substance abuse, and incarceration. Child abuse can affect the way the brain develops because psychological components can change. This not only impacts how you socialize, but it can also impact how you process information and learn. This affects their academics, how far they can go in life, and the types of jobs they can get later on. And then these things do not just bounce right back, it takes time. Therefore, depression in children and adults is a very apparent problem right now. And then later on, some consequences from abuse can be memory and socioeconomic status. So memory can be delayed due to emotionally distressing traumatic events that took place. Some children hope to forget what happened, and then that can hinder their memory as they age. And due to neglect or maltreatment, some children don't finish school or they take a test to finish early, which may cause problems with educational level and socioeconomic status due to lower levels of education, employment earnings, and fewer assets as an adult. And then this can be because some kids don't have the basic needs growing up, and this can cause them to not know how to support themselves in adulthood because it was never demonstrated to them as a child. And then some recommendations for this issues would be implementing trainings in schools, hospitals, and then for law enforcement, bring more awareness to this issue, coming together with the child and other people from the community, and then always advocating for that child. All right, and then these are my references. Thank you so much for listening, and let me know if you have any questions.